Welcome to section 7 of reproductive embryology. In this section, we'll be discussing pharyngeal clefts and pouches. Let's get started. This is an overview figure of early fetal development, which we discussed in section 1 of reproductive embryology. During the latter part of this process, approximately during week 4 of development, which would be right here, the pharyngeal apparatus forms, which we'll talk about more in a second. As you hopefully recall, this perspective of the developing embryo is showing a cross-section. However, if we took a coronal view through the mother, so we get a view of the uterus and the developing embryo, kind of like this image right here around week 12, but just earlier in development around week 4, we'd be able to see a lateral view of the developing embryo. So it would look something like this. Again, this is looking at the embryo around week 4 of development from a lateral view. From this perspective, you can see several little bulges on the embryo towards the central region right here. And these are known as pharyngeal arches. Now, if we take a slice through this region, like we've shown on the image, and look at it from this angle, we can see what's known as the pharyngeal apparatus. This is an image of the pharyngeal apparatus, and this is really the meat and potatoes of the next few lectures. As you can see, it's composed of clefts, arches, and pouches. Broadly speaking, the pharyngeal apparatus forms various structures of the head and neck. The outer aspect of the pharyngeal apparatus has small grooves known as clefts, or grooves, which you can see in yellow. They are derived from ectoderm. The middle bulges, shown in green, are known as arches, and these are derived from mesoderm, and neural crest cells are also contained within this region. Remember, the neural crest cells come from neuroectoderm, so neural crest cells travel from a different region and go into this mesoderm area. Notice that arches contain arteries, cartilage, and nerves, which we've shown right here. Lastly, we have pouches, which are shown in pink, and these are derived from endoderm. So to summarize, the pharyngeal apparatus can be easily recalled with the mnemonic CAP. So the pharyngeal apparatus is composed of clefts, arches, and pouches. If you can remember CAP, hopefully you'll remember that this corresponds with the layers going from out to in. So ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm. In this video, we'll discuss the structures derived from the pharyngeal clefts and the pharyngeal pouches. We'll talk about arches in separate videos. All right, let's talk about clefts first. The first cleft becomes the external auditory meatus, and the second through fourth clefts become the temporary cervical sinuses. And during development, these are normally obliterated. Let's look at some images so you can see what I'm talking about. Here are 3 stages of development of the pharyngeal apparatus. I showed an early stage of development earlier in the lecture, which you can see again right here. In the middle, we can see mid-stage development of the pharyngeal apparatus right here. Notice that invaginations are beginning to become more prominent. The outer invaginations are clefts, which can be seen right here, and the inner invaginations are the pouches, which can be seen right here. Finally, on the right, we can see a later stage of development with some of the final human structures beginning to form. Let's zoom up on this image so we can see things better. As I mentioned a second ago, the first pharyngeal cleft becomes the external auditory meatus, which we can see right here. This is an image of an adult human ear. As you can see, the external auditory meatus, which is also known as the ear canal, is shown right here. So the first pharyngeal cleft forms the ear canal. The second, third, and fourth pharyngeal clefts become what's known as the temporary cervical sinus, which you can see right here. As is implied in the name, this is a temporary structure that is normally only present during fetal development and eventually becomes obliterated. However, if the temporary cervical sinus is not obliterated, then patients may develop what's known as a branchial cleft cyst. So again, branchial cleft cysts are due to failure of the temporary cervical sinus to obliterate. They are much more common in children and rare in adults. They present as a neck mass that is located anterior to the sternocleidomastoid muscle, which is in the lateral neck region. I'll show you a picture of this in a second. These cysts are often confused with cancer, which should definitely be on the differential of a child with a neck mass. It presents as an immovable mass when swallowing, and you must be able to differentiate this from a thyroglossal duct cyst. The location of these 2 congenital disorders is really what will help you differentiate them. A branchial cleft cyst presents as a lateral neck mass, whereas a thyroglossal duct cyst presents as a midline neck mass. We talk more about thyroglossal duct cysts in endocrine embryology. This is an image of a branchial cleft cyst. We can see the cyst right here. Notice that it's anterior to the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and it can be palpated in the lateral neck region. Here is an image of a patient with a branchial cleft cyst. As you can see, he has a large mass on the lateral aspect of his neck right here. Surprisingly, this patient is relatively old. However, like we just learned, it's much more common for these masses to be present in young children. You've probably also noticed that this mass is quite large in this individual. All right, now that we've discussed the pharyngeal clefts, let's move on to discuss the pharyngeal pouches. Again, these make up the inner portion of the pharyngeal apparatus, which we can see right here, and recall that these are made of endoderm. This is a summary table of the pharyngeal pouches and their derivatives. The first pharyngeal pouch becomes the middle ear cavity, the eustachian tube, and mastoid air cells. From this image, you can see the first pharyngeal pouch right here, and notice that we've stated that this is the primitive tympanic cavity, which forms the middle ear cavity, the mastoid air cells, and the eustachian tube. If we return to this image, we can see the middle ear cavity right here, along with the eustachian tube right here. This is a coronal section of the temporal bone and the ear. Notice that the mastoid air cells can be seen right here. Also notice that they are air-filled cavities which help protect the ear. The second pharyngeal pouch becomes the palatine tonsil. We can see the second pharyngeal pouch right here, and notice that we've shown it labeled as the palatine tonsil. Here is a picture of palatine tonsils. In this picture, they're quite inflamed, and you can see them right here. The third pharyngeal pouch has two parts, the dorsal wings and the ventral wings. The dorsal wings become the inferior parathyroids, and the ventral wings become the thymus. We can see the third pharyngeal pouch right here, and notice in this image that the top part, which is the dorsal wing, becomes the inferior parathyroids, and the bottom part, which is the ventral wing, becomes the thymus. The fourth pouch's dorsal wings give rise to the superior parathyroids, and the ventral wings give rise to the ultimopharyngeal body. The ultimopharyngeal body gives rise to the parafollicular C cells of the thyroid, which secrete calcitonin. In this image, we can see the fourth pharyngeal pouch right here. Notice in this image that the top part, which is the dorsal wing, becomes the superior parathyroids, and the bottom part, which is the ventral wing, becomes the ultimopharyngeal body and the parafollicular C cells of the thyroid. One question you may have at this point is, how does the fourth pouch give rise to the superior parathyroids if it's located inferior to the third pouch? Well, actually, all of the structures of the third pouch are located inferiorly to the fourth. This is because in the adult, all of the structures of the third pharyngeal pouch move downward and are ultimately located inferiorly to the fourth pouch. Let's take a closer look at why this is the case. This image shows the movement of the third and fourth pharyngeal pouch structures. If you look at the first picture, we can see the inferior parathyroids right here in red. Notice that they start attached to the thymus and initially superior to the structures of the fourth pouch. So the superior parathyroids seen in dark blue right here, and the ultimopharyngeal body seen in green right here. The thymus, shown in the light blue color right here, migrates inferiorly to fuse below the thyroid, shown in the beige color. It takes the inferior parathyroids with it to place them below the superior parathyroid on the thyroid gland. So if we look at the week 6 mark, we can see that the thymus in light blue has migrated inferiorly right here, along with the inferior parathyroid glands right here. At the week 7 mark, we can see that this continues to occur as the thymus migrates further inferiorly and the inferior parathyroids stay put. So right here and right here. So just remember, all of the structures derived from the third pouch end up inferior to the structures of the fourth pouch, although they don't start off that way. All right, now that we've covered all the information about the pharyngeal clefts and pouches, let's review with a question. A 3-year-old boy is brought to the clinic because he has been displaying muscle weakness, fatigue, tingling in his fingers, and frequent infections. A complete metabolic panel reveals a low calcium level. Blood work also shows a T-cell deficiency. If these conditions are caused by a defect in the pharyngeal apparatus, malformation of which of the following structures would most likely cause his symptoms? A, first and second arch, B, third and fourth arch, C, fourth and sixth arch, D, first and second pouch, or E, third and fourth pouch. Okay, hopefully from the question stem you notice that the two main issues are hypocalcemia and a T-cell deficiency. Remember that the pharyngeal pouches give rise to the parathyroid glands and the thymus. A problem with this would definitely lead to the symptoms seen in this boy, because the parathyroid gland helps regulate calcium levels, and the thymus aids in T-cell development. Specifically, the thymus and parathyroid glands are derived from the third and fourth pouch, so in this case, the correct answer is E. The first and second arches give rise to a lot of structures in the face, such as the maxillary artery, the muscles of mastication, and the muscles of facial expression. However, defects in any of these would not lead to hypocalcemia or a T-cell deficiency, so A is incorrect. The third and fourth arches give rise to many structures such as the stylopharyngeus muscle and the pharyngeal and laryngeal musculature. Again, defects in any of these would not lead to hypocalcemia or a T-cell deficiency, so B is incorrect. The fourth and sixth arches also give rise to many structures, such as the laryngeal musculature. And again, these would not cause the child's symptoms. So C is incorrect. Finally, the first pouch gives rise to the middle ear cavity, eustachian tube, and mastoid air cells. And the second pouch gives rise to the palatine tonsil. And none of these would cause a T cell deficiency or low calcium levels. So D is incorrect. So again, the correct answer is E. And with that, we've covered everything you need to know about the pharyngeal clefts and pouches.